Beyond the Hype, a fashion lifestyle tech podcast. Presented by Stephanie Williams and Greg Lewis.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive? This time we're taking you back to like 2022-ish, right at the peak of, well, a lot of hype, honestly. Remember when NFTs were going to change the world and the metaverse was the hottest ticket in tech?
Yeah, it felt like everyone and their grandmother was suddenly an expert in cryptocurrency and virtual real estate.
Exactly. And in the middle of all that, there was this company, fashHub, that was trying to merge that digital frenzy with, of all things, music festivals and fashion.
It's an interesting combination, to say the least.
Right. So what was fashHub all about? Imagine yourself at Coachella, right? Phone in hand, obviously, because what's a music festival without documenting every second?
And the endless stream of selfies, of course. Of course. But here's the twist. Instead of just your regular outfit, you're rocking this totally unique digital merch, like layered over your real-time look through your phone. Think virtual concert tees, artist-designed accessories, all that jazz. That was fashHub's big idea.
It sounds pretty cool on paper, right? The technology behind it was augmented reality, or AR, which was already starting to gain some serious traction. And let's be real, who doesn't love the idea of expressing themselves through fashion, especially when it's something as unique and exclusive as digital merch from your favorite artists?
Totally. So they were tapping into a couple of major trends, both in terms of tech and culture. But here's the question. Did they actually pull it off? Or were they like way ahead of their time? That's what we're going to find out today.
It's a story with its fair share of twists and turns, that's for sure.
Buckle up, because we're going to break it all down from their big launch to, well, their not so happy ending. And trust me, there's a lot to unpack here. But before we get into all that, let's talk about the masterminds behind fashHub. These weren't just some random guys in a garage, right?
Not even close. We're talking some serious heavy hitters in the fashion and tech worlds.
Okay, so first up, we've got Tonny Sorensen. Now, that name might not ring a bell immediately, but he's the co-founder of Von Dutch.
Wait, that Von Dutch, as in the trucker hat craze that took over the early 2000s.
The one and only.
Wow, talk about street cred. Having someone like Sorensen with his track record step into the digital fashion scene, that was a big deal. It made you think, okay, maybe there's something to this whole digital fashion thing.
Right. And then on top of that, you've got Lars Rahbaek, who was already making waves in the digital fashion world at a company called Mojimoto. So you've got these two powerhouses, each with their own expertise, coming together to create this revolutionary platform. At least that was the plan.
Ambition was definitely not lacking.
Not at all. So we've got the vision, we've got the tech, and we've got the big names backing it up. Sounds like a recipe for success, right? But as we know, things don't always go according to plan, especially in the world of startups. So you're probably thinking, okay, this all sounds amazing, so where did it all go wrong?
Right. Well, it's actually a pretty classic startup story when you think about it.
Yeah.
Big ideas, even bigger ambitions, and then reality sets in.
Don't sugarcoat it for us. Give us the dirt.
Okay, so remember how I mentioned that fashHub managed to score that huge partnership with Live Nation right out of the gate?
Yeah, that seemed like a major win. They were launching at those massive European music festivals, right?
Exactly. But like with any deal, there were some pretty significant strings attached.
Uh-oh, this is where it starts to unravel, isn't it?
It kind of does. You see, that Live Nation deal came with a non-negotiable deadline. They had to be ready to launch at those festivals no matter what. And when you're talking about developing an app, especially one that relies on cutting-edge tech like augmented reality,
Things can get messy.
to put it mildly, the timeline was incredibly tight, and they basically had to fast-track development to make it work.
So instead of having the time to, work out all the kinks and make sure everything runs smoothly, they're rushing to get it out the door.
Exactly. And as you can imagine, that led to some, shall we say, challenges.
Let me guess, the app was a bit of a buggy mess.
It wasn't pretty. I mean, launching a new product is always risky, but when you're dealing with something as technically complex as AR, any little hiccup is amplified. And unfortunately for fashHub, there were more than a few hiccups.
So users are trying to, virtually try on this exclusive merch, and the app's crashing left and right. That's not exactly a recipe for a 5-star review.
Not even close. And in the world of apps, first impressions are everything. If you don't grab users from the get-go, they're gone.
Ouch. Okay, so a rushed launch with a less than stellar app experience. That's already a pretty big hurdle to overcome. But there's more, isn't there?
Oh yeah, the story doesn't end there. Remember how NFTs were all the rage back then?
It was impossible to escape them.
Well, fashHub's initial vision was to lean heavily into that whole NFT craze. They wanted users to be able to buy, own, and even trade their digital merch. It was a pretty bold move at the time.
It made sense though, right? NFTs were supposed to be the future of digital ownership, and what's more ownable than a piece of virtual clothing designed by your favorite band?
Exactly. But there was one major problem. Well, one major problem in addition to the app issues. Apple.
Apple. What did they have to do with it?
Back in 2022, Apple's App Store had some pretty strict rules about in-app purchases, and NFTs were like this whole gray area.
But so basically, fashHub banked on being able to use NFTs, and Apple was like, nope, not so fast.
Pretty much. And they were forced to make a major pivot, like right before launch.
You're kidding. What did they do?
They had to completely ditch the whole NFT system and scramble to implement a more traditional in-app purchase model.
Oh man, talk about a nightmare scenario. They're dealing with a glitchy app, a tight deadline, and then they have to completely overhaul their entire business model at the last minute.
And remember, this is all happening against the backdrop of a rapidly evolving tech landscape where user expectations are sky high and competition is cutthroat.
Honestly, at this point, it sounds less like a business plan and more like a recipe for disaster.
It's definitely a case study in what not to do when launching a tech startup.
So what happened? Did they manage to salvage anything after that disastrous launch and the whole NFT debacle, or was that pretty much the final nail in the coffin?
Well, they tried to adapt. To their credit, they didn't just throw in the towel immediately. They kept working on the app, trying to iron out the technical issues, and they pivoted their marketing to focus on the more traditional in-app purchase model.
So they were still trying to sell people on the idea of digital fashion, even without that sense of ownership that came with the NFTs.
Yeah, which was always going to be an uphill battle. Because let's face it, even with all the hype, digital fashion was still a pretty niche market back then.
It's like you're asking someone to pay real money for something that essentially only exists in the digital world, and it's not like you can wear it outside of the app, right?
Exactly. So not only did they have to overcome the technical hurdles and the App Store restrictions, but they also had to convince the average person that yes, this virtual t-shirt is worth spending your hard-earned cash on.
I can see why they struggled. That's a tough sell, even today, and the tech is so much better now.
Oh, absolutely. And remember, this was 2022. The metaverse was still this abstract concept for most people, and augmented reality was mostly associated with, Pokemon Go. It wasn't exactly mainstream technology.
So what's the takeaway here? Was fashHub just a case of the right idea at the wrong time?
It's hard to say for sure. There were definitely some missteps along the way, some avoidable ones even, but there's also something to be said for being ahead of the curve.
Right, like they were pioneers in a way. They were trying to create something truly new at the intersection of fashion, tech, and fandom.
Exactly. And even though they ultimately weren't successful, their story offers some valuable lessons for anyone trying to innovate in those spaces.
It's like that old saying, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, right?
Yeah.
Except in this case, they broke a whole lot of eggs and maybe forgot to buy the cheese.
That's one way to put it. But in all seriousness, fashHub's story reminds us that even the most experienced entrepreneurs, even those with big ideas and even bigger names backing them, can stumble.
It's a good reminder that timing is everything in the tech world, and that even the most promising startups can fall victim to things like, an app that crashes more than your grandma's computer, and a global pandemic that throws the entire entertainment industry into chaos.
You could say that again. It makes you wonder, though, what could have been, right? What if they'd had a little more time to perfect the technology? What if the NFT market hadn't imploded?
What if they launched at a knitting convention instead of a music festival?
Okay, maybe not that last one, but you get the idea. There were a lot of external factors at play, and ultimately fashHub just couldn't catch a break.
It's a story that's both fascinating and honestly a little bit heartbreaking, because even though it didn't work out, you can't help but admire their ambition.
Absolutely. They were dreamers, and they took a chance, and that's something worth celebrating, even if the ending wasn't what they hoped for.
Well said. And hey, maybe someone listening right now will be inspired by fashHub's story, learn from their mistakes, and finally crack the code on digital fashion. Who knows? Maybe the metaverse is just waiting for its next big fashion icon. Until next time, happy diving.
Beyond the Hype, a fashion lifestyle tech podcast.